It is the afternoon of November 30th, which means it is the last day of the 30 Hard for Writers Challenge, and I am here to share my results with you. I have to admit that completing the 75 Hard for Writers Challenge that I did at the beginning of the year actually felt easier than completing the 30 Hard for Writers Challenge during this time of year. And I think that's because the momentum at the start of the year is much stronger for me. Everyone is starting their New Year's goals. There's the promise of spring. The days are getting brighter. And it's also a time when I'm starting to think about graduation for my students and thinking about the new paths that they will be embarking on. Whereas with this time of year, especially with the time change, the days are getting darker and the nights are getting colder. And then there's the chaos of the start of the semester after this really long, lovely summer break. And all of this compounding ended up making the 30 Hard for Writers Challenge much harder for me to do than the 75 Hard for Writers Challenge. Even though the challenge is 45 days less, which is only 40% of the actual 75 Hard for Writers Challenge. But what I am grateful for, since we are coming out of Thanksgiving, is that November is novel writing month. And so there is tons of momentum around writers all over the world starting their drafts, editing their drafts, drafting their drafts, and also finishing their drafts. And it was because of that collective energy I felt much more motivated to finish the challenge. I did upload a midpoint update video if you do want to know how the first 15 days of the challenge went for me. I will link that video along with my results from the 75 Hard for Writers Challenge for you in the description box below, just so you can see the differences in what I was able to accomplish in both challenges. Just as a reminder, my plan for this challenge was to be working on the last 5 chapters of my contemporary YA manuscript that I've been calling Project Soul. And I started this project in November 2023. So it's been 2 years since I have been in the writing and drafting and editing phase. Now let's get to my results. I started the challenge with 104,553 words. And I ended the challenge with a whopping 111,445 words, which means I wrote 6,911 words during this challenge. In these 30 days, I worked on redrafting 2 chapters, chapter 42, as well as redrafting chapter 43. I did redraft these chapters from scratch. I did maybe pull 1 or 2 sentences from the previous draft into these chapters. However, for the most part, these redraftings are brand new scenes, brand new words. Chapter 42 ended up being 2,148 words, while as of completing the chapter 43 this morning, chapter 43 currently sits at 2,152 words. So in total, chapter 42 and chapter 43, I added 4,300 words to the manuscript. In my last update, I talked about how I had to go back and work through some of the earlier chapters because I had made a change to what was happening in chapter 42 that linked to what was happening in some of the early chapters. When I calculated those revisions, I wrote an additional 2,611 words. So that means that is my total. So the 6,911 words are the total words that I wrote during this challenge. Again, my tragic flaw is overwriting, so I know that in the next draft, I am going to be cutting paragraphs, cutting sentences, and cutting scenes. My hope is that I won't have to cut any characters, but I am also willing to take merging characters into consideration in order to get this next draft down to an appropriate word count. I would also like to say that because these are the final 5 chapters of the novel, and because I'm really trying to get to the satisfactory and sort of kind of overall feeling of the novel, that I'm allowing myself to write as much as I want, just so that I'm able to capture the feeling and capture the dialogue and capture the moment that is going to make the ending of the novel feel very satisfactory, not only to me, but also hopefully to my readers. So it took me these 30 days to redraft the 2 chapters, which means it'll probably take me another 6 to 7 weeks to finish drafting the last 3 chapters of the manuscript. Which means I do plan on maintaining this pace of revision going into December and January. So essentially, I am planning on continuing to have 2 45-minute writing sprints per day in order to make sure that I can knock out these next 3 chapters in the next 2 months. So what that will mean is that I will most likely come up against the beginning of the semester as I am done finishing this draft, and then I will take a break for most of February before moving into draft 6, so that way I can definitely have time with the next set of revisions before hopefully begin my querying process in the late summer, early fall. Fingers crossed. During the second half of the challenge, I only missed 2 days of reading, once on February 21st, because I ended up having a really busy day, and then the second day that I missed was on Thanksgiving Day, but I ended up catching up on my reading on Friday, and then I ended up just finishing the craft book last night because I didn't want to have to keep reading it past the challenge, even though there was about an additional 40 pages left outside of what I would need to be reading for the challenge. As for my writing sessions in the second half of the challenge, I only missed 1 session, and that 1 session ended up being on Thanksgiving Day. I was able to do my first writing session in the morning, but by the time all the food was prepared and friends had come over, I was way too tired to get that second writing session in the evening. But I did end up making up that writing session this morning. So this morning, instead of just having 2 45-minute writing sessions, I ended up having 3 45-minute writing sessions. So as a whole for the challenge, I ended up completing 58 45-minute writing sessions, 3 60-minute writing sessions, and then 1 15-minute writing session for a total of 46 hours and 45 minutes of writing. As for my craft book reading, it took me 12 hours to read all 345 pages of the magic words. Even though I made myself make up for the missed writing and reading sessions, according to my stats, I did miss 6 days of completing the challenge. And since I was giving myself $1 a day, that means I banked $24 to treat myself, as well as drinking as much tea as I could possibly handle. And then I did keep track of my daily word count. Even though the challenge was slightly harder than I thought it was going to be, I'm really glad that I ended up completing it, especially looking at how much I was able to accomplish during this challenge. And I'm also really glad that the challenge requires me to be reading more craft books because I learned so much from reading the magic words. I think it was a really well-crafted craft book that can be read by middle grade and YA authors at all stages of their career. Because I read Save the Cat Writes a Young Adult Novel by Jessica Brody as a part of my 75 Hard for Writers Challenge, I actually think both of these books, so both The Magic Words and Save the Cat, are a really great pairing if you are invested in writing middle grade and young adult fiction. If you are a novice writer beginning to think about what does it mean to be writing middle grade and young adult, then I would actually recommend reading The Magic Words first before reading Save the Cat Writes a Young Adult Novel, because I do find The Magic Words to be slightly less intimidating than Save the Cat. But if you are a more mature writer and already understand what it means to be writing for a young audience, then I think reading one before the other won't have that much of an impact or won't be that much more different for you. The magic words was what I wanted from the emotional craft of fiction that I felt that I wasn't able to get from that craft book. In my results for the 75 Hard for Writers Challenge, I did talk about how I felt that the emotional craft was better suited for adult writers, as well as perhaps maybe young adult fantasy or young adult fiction that leans more literary. But I do feel that Klein has been able to do what Maass has done for the adult writer, but specifically for the middle grade and young adult writer. And when it comes to the chapters that I really enjoyed, I would definitely recommend reading chapter 5, which is titled Effort and Flow, How to Write a Novel. I would also recommend reading chapter 7, which is titled Identity and Choice, Creating Multi-Dimensional Characters. And then I also recommend reading Structure and Sensibility, The Power of Plot, as well as Movement and Momentum, Controlling Your Pace and Prosody. There are also so many exercises in the book. I didn't end up doing any of those exercises during the challenge, but I did flag a bunch of them that I definitely plan on going back to now that the challenge is over. I will be teaching a children's literature creative writing course this spring, so I'm actually going to be using some of the exercises listed in the book in my course as well. And a lot of the examples that Klein uses in the text are from really well-loved and well-known middle grade and young adult novels, like the Crossover by Kwame Alexander, and of course, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I do want to end this video by reading a few lines from chapter 5, which is Effort and Flow, and this is on page 57 in a section called Explore. In the meantime, your job for the first draft is to explore, to find out what characters spark for you and on the page, what the story is, what the book is about, to locate the heart and spirit of the project. If you can find that spirit and keep to it as you write your first draft, feel free to ignore mechanical issues like changing a character's name halfway through or the fact that you didn't really set up the plot twist you now love. You can easily tidy up these details and revisions, but you can't revise the text that hasn't been written. And right now, you just need to get the text on the page. As Jane Smiley says, every first draft is perfect because all a first draft has to do is exist. So with that, I will end the video here. If you have completed the 30 Hard for Writers Challenge, please feel free to let me know in the comments below so that I can celebrate with you. Or if you did not complete the challenge, also feel free to let me know in the comments below so that I can also celebrate with you. Either way, thank you for joining me in this challenge and thank you for watching this video. I will see you in the next one.